meter on, let it boot up, let the spectrophotometer warm up. And we're going to initialize the system by initializing the arm. The Z-axis arm will raise. And after a few seconds delay, the X and Y will move to position. Found its place, and the screen will tell us it's good, ready to go to the next step. The beep is the spectrophotometer aligning itself. Then go to the second operating screen, we press the read dilute button. Minimize the keyboard by pressing the minus sign on it. To finish the initialization, we have to press the return to home button. The XY arm moves home. And it's ready to go. Now, the first thing I like to do in a situation like this is to do a purge valve, which flushes fluid through the valve assembly. We use some blue dye to see that there's something going on here. Basically, what we're checking is to make sure that the valve is actually moving, that we have air pressure, and everything's good to go for that. Is filling, and the other side flips and fills, so we know we're working fine. I like to do that before I do the syringe pump, so I don't turn the syringe pump on with a blockage in the system and then break a syringe. That's done, I'd like to go down and do a flush valve, which flushes this system out, switches back to the water. And it also cycles the syringe pump. Now that we know that the valve is shifting fine, we won't have any back pressure issues. And there should be approximately half a second to a second delay, or a little bit longer when that stops to when it starts again. If it's too fast, this system won't fully fill with liquid, the volumes will be off. So we have to give it that pause time to dwell long enough to fill, make sure that it's stabilized. We check to make sure there's no air bubbles drawn in from any loose spots, especially after the system's been sitting for a while. These paper washers can dry out and then they'll cause air checks. All I do there is just moisten it down, let it wait a couple minutes and then go, and it usually fixes that. That's done, we'll calibrate the pump. We do 5 shots or 5 flush cycles of the syringe pump into 50 milliliter volumetrics. We're looking for 50 mils and 5 shots, which is 10 per shot. First step is we move the arm out so we can get access to the delivery spouts. The arm will move out a bit so I can place the tubes spouts, and then press OK to let it cycle. And sit there and it'll do it 5 times because we've got 5 flush cycles entered in the data box over there. Which is our default. When it powers up, it defaults to 5 flush cycles. Once it's done, we check the volumes. We want to make sure that we're on the lines, which we are. Because this machine has been set up recently. If not, we would have to loosen this nut here and then adjust the screw to either increase or decrease the flow of fluid. And then have to retest over again. Once we're done, we press OK. We send the arm back home. Next step is to flush the flow cell. That draws fluid from the flow cell probe through the spectrophotometer and registers the readings here on the screen. The screen registers the data here because you can't see this without a step stool. With an initialized water, we should see 100% transmittance on the display, which we do. But we won't see 0.0. It shows every other decimal when it's present except for zeros.
Ignore slide 2. Ignore slide 2.
And now it's done. Turn off the RS-232 since we're not communicating to another computer. The next step we'll do is an alternate mode test for diluting, which will draw fluid from each of these 5 test tubes because we're going to tell it 5 samples. It will dispense 4 dispensings of each one of these tubes into the rack. We draw fluid in here, we fill up the 0.1s and 0.15 milliliter loops, and then when we dispense them, we push 10 mils of fluid with the contents of the loop into the tube. So we select diluter alternate, place the diluter probe in the probe holder, and it fits in so the little black piece on the probe is flush with the top of the metal unit. And then we press start to start the test. It tells us when we're executing an alternate test. If we made a mistake, we can just press cancel and back out of it. And we press OK. The first thing it'll do is it'll cycle twice into this pump, into the waste pan, just to make sure that everything's functioning properly one more time. Over to position 1 in the sample rack, the small rack. And it'll draw and fill these loops. In this case, we're using water, so we won't see any activity going on. The cycle is to fill both loops. Now we'll come over and dispense. The first 2 deliveries are the small loops, the 0.1 milliliter loops. We mark them 1 and 3 on the machine. And then 2 and 4 are the long loops, which are 0.15. Once that's accomplished, it'll go to the second position in the sample. This time we're using blue dye so we can see the loops charge up with the fluid. When it dispenses, you'll see the fluid disappear. It'll be flushed out with the clear water, first in the short loops. And then in the longer loops. Now just repeat the cycle. next test we'll do is the diluter normal mode, and we'll continue to fill the same tubes here. We'll tell it that we're going to do 5 samples, 5 tubes in this rack. We're going to tell it in this case that we're going to do 0 flush cycles. A flush cycle would be a buffer or a blank that you would put in here to flush the system out prior to actually diluting samples for the rack. And the flush cycles are not dispensed in the rack. They're lost, they're dumped in the waste pan and lost. So to change the data, we call up the keyboard by pressing the keyboard icon, which happens to minimize itself to the active screen. Touch over here, it moves there, it moves there. This big button here closes it. Basically, it's a standard, from here it's a standard keyboard. You click in the cell you want, and then you can edit the data just as a normal keyboard. So we tell it 5 samples, 0 flush cycles. So it's going to draw fluid from all 5 of these tubes, but it's not going to dispense all of the fluid that it draws from these tubes in this rack. The first tube is only going to do 2 samples instead of 4. It's going to do just the first two samples are going to be a waste. They're just going to be straight medium. And then the other half of the first tube is going to get lost in this case. Tubes 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 will dispense here for 4 each, just like before. The 5th one will only dispense 2 of its 2 loops. The other 2 will get lost into the waste pan. Press start. It says normal test is starting. And away we go. Again, we cycle twice. This replicates the dilution on an Autoturb 1, the original machine. Which is why it's been given the name normal mode. There, our second dispensing goes from there instead of in the waste. Because those 2 tubes are void. They don't have 4 replicates to match up with anything, so they're just ignored later on in the report.